Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku awakened the origin power. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The air in the beast forest smelled of pine needles, damp earth, and the faint, acrid scent of ozone that always preceded a disaster. It was a suffocating tranquility, the kind of silence that screams. Izuku Midoriya stood on the precipice of the cliff, his red sneakers digging into the dirt. The darkness of the night was thick, swallowing the trees below, but the terror in front of him was illuminated by the moonlight cutting through the clouds. Kota was trembling. The small boy, barely more than a toddler in the grand scheme of the world, was pressed against the rock face, his eyes wide, reflecting a paralyzed horror. Standing between them and safety was a mountain of muscle and malice. "You know," the villain rumbled, his voice a gravelly baritone that vibrated in Izuku's chest. "I really wanted to fight the loud ones. The flashier, the better. But I suppose a student will do for a warm-up." Muscular. The name was simple, crude, and terrifyingly accurate. As Izuku watched, the fibers of the man's muscle tissue tore through his skin, wrapping around his limbs like thick, pulsating pythons. The sheer biological density of the quirk was nauseating to look at, layers upon layers of raw power, expanding, hardening, consuming the human form beneath. Izuku swallowed the bile rising in his throat. Think. Don't freeze. Analyze. One for all, full cowling. 5%. Green lightning crackled around Izuku's body, a familiar comfort. It was the hum of an engine he had learned to drive, albeit barely. He felt the power thrumming in his veins, the stockpile of 8 generations of heroes. It felt sturdy. Reliable. "Run, Kota!" Izuku shouted, his voice cracking slightly. "Get back to the camp! Don't look back. I can't." Kota's voice was a whisper, lost in the wind. Muscular laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. "Run? There's nowhere to run, kid. This whole mountain is a cage. And I'm the butcher." He moved. It wasn't speed, it was displacement. One moment Muscular was 10 meters away, and the next, the air where Izuku had been standing exploded. Izuku barely managed to dodge, kicking off the rock face, but the shockwave alone rattled his teeth. He tumbled through the air, righting himself with a burst of erratic movement. "He's fast. Faster than Kaken. Faster than Ida. Is that it?" Muscular grinned, turning his massive, fibrin-cased neck. "You're hopping around like a cricket. Show me something worth killing." Izuku landed in a crouch, his breath hitching. "I can't let him get past me. If he touches Kota, it's over instantly. I have to draw his attention." Smash! Izuku lunged. He didn't hold back the speed, channeling the maximum safe limit of 5% into his right leg, swinging a roundhouse kick aimed at the villain's temple. It was a clean hit. Perfect form. Thud. It felt like kicking a solid steel beam wrapped in rubber. Muscular didn't even flinch. The fibers around his head shifted slightly, absorbing the impact as if it were a gentle breeze. That, Muscular said, grabbing Izuku's leg mid-air, was disappointing. The world spun. Izuku was slammed into the cliffside with force that emptied his lungs instantly. Stone cracked behind him. Pain, hot and white, blinded him for a second. "Gah!" Izuku gasped, dropping to the ground as Muscular released him. He scrambled back, his hands scraping against the dirt. "My turn," the villain declared. He raised a fist the size of a boulder. "One for all, 100%. The thought flashed through Izuku's mind. It was suicide for his limbs. If he used 100% now, his arm would shatter. But if he didn't use it, he would die. And Kota would die. "Do it!" Izuku screamed, the green lightning flaring brighter. He channeled the entire stockpile into his right arm, feeling the bones creak under the pressure. He threw the punch to meet Muscular's. The collision shook the mountain. Dust and debris erupted into a massive cloud. The sound was deafening, a thunderclap that echoed down into the valley. For a moment silence returned. "Not bad," a voice came from the dust. Izuku's eyes widened. The dust cleared. Muscular was standing there. He had taken the 100% Detroit smash head-on. The fibers on his arm were frayed, torn in places, but beneath them, new layers were already surging up to replace the damage. "You're strong, kid," Muscular said, his eyes gleaming with a sadistic delight. "But simply being strong isn't enough. You lack depth." Izuku's right arm hung limp at his side. It wasn't broken. He had managed to pull the punch back at the last microsecond to avoid total shattering. But the ligaments were strained, the muscles screaming in agony. It didn't work. All Might's power. It didn't work. Panic, cold and sharp, began to set in. This wasn't a school exercise. This wasn't a tournament match. This was a predator playing with prey. Now Muscular stepped forward, the ground shaking with each footfall. "Let me show you what real power looks like." He lunged again, but this time, he didn't strike. He grabbed. His massive hand engulfed Izuku's torso, pinning him against the rock wall. The pressure was immense. Izuku felt his ribs groaning. "Stop!" Kota screamed, throwing a rock. It bounced harmlessly off Muscular's back. Muscular glanced over his shoulder. "Annoying brat. Wait your turn. I'm going to squeeze the juice out of this one first." He began to squeeze. Izuku cried out, his vision blurring. He clawed at the muscle fibers, but they were as hard as iron. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. The edges of his vision began to turn black. "I'm going to die." The thought was clinical. Detached. "I'm going to die here, and then he's going to kill Kota." "Mom." "All Might. I'm sorry." Water hose. A splash of cold water hit Muscular's face. It was weak. It was pathetic, really. A tiny stream of water from a terrified child's palms. Kota was standing there, shaking, tears streaming down his face, his hands outstretched. "Let him go!" Kota shrieked. Muscular froze. He wiped the water from his eye, a low growl building in his throat. The pressure on Izuku's chest lessened slightly as the villain's attention shifted. "You know," Muscular whispered, his voice dropping to a terrifying calm. "I killed your parents. They were annoying, too. Always talking about duty and justice. And now, here you are. Weak. Pathetic. Just like them." The villain's grip tightened again, but his focus was on the boy. "I think I'll change the order. Watch this, hero. Watch me pop him like a grape." Muscular raised his free hand, muscle fibers winding up like a piston aimed directly at Kota. No. Time seemed to slow down. Izuku watched the fist rise. He saw Kota's face, the acceptance of death in the eyes of a child. He saw the water dripping from Kota's hands. "Move. Move. Move." Izuku tried to summon One for All. He reached for the stockpile, for that well of power he had been dipping into with a teaspoon. He needed more. He needed everything. 1,000,000%. Izuku screamed in his mind, a lie he told his body to force it past the limits. But something was wrong. Usually, when Izuku reached for One for All, he visualized an egg in a microwave. Or a switch. He visualized the feeling of all might. But in this moment of absolute, transcendent trauma, watching a child about to be murdered while being crushed to death, Izuku's mind didn't go to the microwave. It didn't go to All Might. It went deeper. In the dark, metaphysical hallway of his soul, where the quirk resided, Izuku didn't just open the door. He didn't just turn the handle. He smashed through the wall. Crack. It wasn't a sound in the physical world. It was the sound of a seal breaking. A sound of ancient glass shattering under the weight of an ocean. Within the core of One for All, the singularity, the point where the quirk's power exceeded the capacity of a human vessel, had been approaching for decades. It was meant to happen years from now. It was meant to be a gradual unspooling, but Izuku's desperation acted as a catalyst. His emotional state, combined with the lethal physical pressure, forced a premature evolution. The hallway flooded. "Wait! He's not ready!" A voice screamed in his head. A woman's voice. Nana Shimura. "It doesn't matter! The boy is dying!" A man's voice. Rough. Urgent. "Let it flow!" A third voice whispered. Ancient. Soft. "Awaken, ninth!" The world outside paused. Muscular's fist was inches from Kota, and then, the beast's forest was blinded. It didn't start with a punch. It started with a sound, a high-pitched, harmonic resonance that shattered the windows of the lodge miles away. The green lightning that usually danced around Izuku vanished. In its place, a blinding, prismatic white light erupted from his chest. It wasn't electricity. It was pure, unadulterated energy. It was heavy. It felt like the air itself had suddenly turned into lead. Muscular was blasted backward, not by a physical hit, but by a shockwave of sheer presence. He tumbled across the clearing, digging his fingers into the earth to stop himself, looking up in confusion. What is this? Muscular stammered. Izuku was no longer pinned against the wall. He was floating. His feet were 6 inches off the ground. His body was limp, like a marionette with its strings cut, yet he remained upright, suspended in the center of a swirling vortex of white energy. His eyes were open, but they were blank. Glowing. A ring of gold circled his emerald irises, spinning slowly. Midoriya? Koda whispered, shielding his eyes from the glare. Izuku didn't answer. He couldn't. His consciousness was currently being stretched across 8 different lifetimes. Inside his mind, it was chaos. He was drowning in memories that weren't his. He felt the sensation of flying. He felt the anger of a man who had lost everything. He felt the tactile sensation of smoke. He felt the tension of a spring loaded to break. Too much. It's too much. His body screamed. The skin on his right arm, previously bruised, began to turn a terrifying shade of violet, then black. Not from necrotic tissue, but from energy burns. The vessels were rupturing, unable to contain the voltage of the origin. I don't know what you did, Muscular roared, shaking off the fear. The villain grinned, his bloodlust spiking. This was it. This was the fight he wanted. But that light, it feels good. It feels like a challenge. Muscular poured everything he had into his quirk. His muscles expanded to monstrous proportions, creating a dome of flesh around him, a tank made of meat. He launched himself at the suspended boy, a juggernaut of destruction. Die! Izuku's head snapped up. He didn't speak. He didn't shout a smash. From his back, shadows erupted. But they weren't the wispy, smoke-like tendrils of a weak quirk. They were thick, convulsing cables of black energy, crackling with the same prismatic lightning that surrounded his body. There were dozens of them. Black whip. The tendrils lashed out faster than sound. They didn't just strike Muscular. They pierced the ground, the cliff, the trees, anchoring Izuku to the world as if to keep him from ascending into the sky. 2 of the massive black whips slammed into Muscular midair. Crack. The sound of the villain's enhanced muscle fibers snapping was sickening. Muscular was halted in midair, suspended by the black tendrils wrapped around his torso. What is this? Muscular choked, blood spurting from his mouth. He tried to flex, tried to burst the bonds, but the black whip tightened. It wasn't just physical restraint, the energy was searing his skin. Izuku raised his right hand. The motion was jerky, mechanical. The air pressure in the clearing dropped. The sensory quirk of the 4th user, Danger Sense, was screaming in Izuku's brain, but in this awakened state, it didn't just warn him of danger. It highlighted every weakness. It showed him exactly where Muscular was vulnerable. It showed him the stress points in the villain's armor, and the 2nd user's quirk. Transmission. It was a primitive, uncontrolled activation. Izuku couldn't control the speed of the object, so the power applied itself to the space between them. Izuku clenched his fist. The air between his palm and Muscular distorted. Be gone. It wasn't a Detroit smash. It was a rejection of reality. A cannonball of compressed air, accelerated to hypersonic speeds by the gearshift phenomenon, slammed into Muscular. There was no resistance. The villain's muscle armor, capable of withstanding 100% of All Might's power, didn't just break. It liquefied. Muscular was launched. He broke the sound barrier instantly. A ragdoll streak of red and gore, fired directly into the cliff face behind him. Boom! The mountain didn't just crack. A crater the size of a swimming pool evaporated into the stone. Dust, rock, and pulverized trees rained down. Muscular was embedded deep in the rock, unconscious, his quirk forcibly deactivated by the sheer trauma of the impact. He hung there, broken, defeated in a single, incomprehensible gesture. Silence returned to the forest. But it was a heavy, terrifying silence. Izuku remained floating. The white light was blinding now. The black whip tendrils were flailing wildly, slicing through trees like hot knives through butter. Midoriya! Kota screamed, realizing that this wasn't safety. This was a natural disaster. Izuku turned his head toward Kota. The golden rings in his eyes were pulsating. Control, breath. A voice echoed from Izuku's mouth, but it wasn't his voice. It sounded like two people speaking at once, Izuku and someone older, rougher. Izuku grabbed his own right arm with his left hand. He was trying to hold it back. The power was leaking. It was a dam breach. If he didn't close the valve, he would explode. Not metaphorically. He would detonate like a nuclear warhead, taking the forest with him. Close it. Close the door. Izuku mentally clawed at the hallway in his mind. The door he had smashed was gone. He had to build a wall of brick and mortar from sheer willpower. I am Izuku Midoriya. I am a hero. I am not this. He focused on Kota. He focused on the fear in the boy's eyes. I'm scaring him. That thought, more than the pain, cut through the haze. Slowly, agonizingly, the white light began to dim. The prismatic lightning receded, turning back into jagged sparks of green. The black whip tendrils retracted, dissolving into smoke that drifted away in the night breeze. Gravity reclaimed him. Izuku dropped to the ground, his knees buckling. He didn't land gracefully. He collapsed face first into the dirt. His right arm was smoking. The sleeve of his costume was gone, incinerated. The skin from his fingertips to his shoulder was black, crisscrossed with glowing red veins that looked like molten lava cooling in rock. Midoriya! Kota scrambled over, tears flowing freely now. Midoriya, wake up! Please! Izuku gasped, inhaling a lungful of dirt. He coughed, rolling onto his back. Every nerve ending in his body was firing at once. It felt like he had been plugged into a power plant. Kota! Izuku rasped. His voice was hoarse, ruined. Are you hurt? No. I'm fine. You saved me. But your arm. Kota hovered his hands over the blackened limb, afraid to touch it. It's okay, Izuku lied. It wasn't okay. He couldn't feel his arm. He couldn't feel his fingers. But he could feel everything else. That was the problem. Even with the power suppressed, the singularity had left a crack in his perception. He closed his eyes, and he didn't see darkness. He saw lights. He felt a cold, sharp presence a mile away, Aizawa. He felt a warm, terrified presence, Mandalay. He felt malicious, rotting presences scattering through the woods, the villains. And he felt something else. A pull. A tug in his gut, pointing northwest. Towards Kamino Ward. Towards him. We have to move, Izuku groaned, forcing himself to sit up. The world tilted violently. The others, they're in danger. The forest north sector. Shota Aizawa was running. He had just engaged the clone of Dabi, realizing it was a distraction. But then, he had felt it. Every hair on his body had stood on end. It wasn't the sensation of being watched. It was the biological imperative of a prey animal sensing a predator. A wave of pressure had swept through the forest, a density that made the air hard to breathe for a split second. It had come from the cliff. Midoriya. Aizawa pushed faster, ignoring the burning in his lungs. He knew that problem child was involved. He always was. But that pressure, that wasn't normal. That wasn't just a quirk activation. That felt like the sky falling. He burst through the tree line near the cliffside and skidded to a halt. His eyes widened. The landscape had changed. The side of the mountain looked like it had been hit by a meteorite. There was a massive, semicircular gouge taken out of the rock face, and in the center of the clearing, limping towards the path, was Izuku Midoriya. The boy looked like he had walked through hell. His clothes were shredded. He was covered in blood and soot. He was carrying the kid, Kota, on his back with his one good arm. But it was the right arm that made Aizawa freeze. It hung dead at his side, charred black, pulsing with a faint, dying light. And the boy's eyes. When Izuku looked up at Aizawa, his eyes were unfocused, wild. Sensei. Izuku mumbled. Aizawa activated his quirk immediately. His hair floated up, his eyes glowing red. He needed to neutralize whatever was happening, just in case. Erasure. But when he looked at Izuku, nothing happened. Usually, when Aizawa erased a quirk, he felt a snip, a cutting of the connection. This time, he felt a backlash. Throb. Pain shot behind Aizawa's eyes. He stumbled back, clutching his head. It was like trying to stop a tsunami with a sheet of paper. The quirk factor in the boy was too dense, too layered. It pushed back. Sensei? Izuku took another step, then stumbled. Aizawa shook off the migraine, rushing forward to catch the boy before he hit the ground. He grabbed Izuku by the uninjured shoulder. Midoriya! What happened? Who did this? Aizawa barked, scanning the perimeter. Izuku didn't answer the question. He grabbed Aizawa's shirt with a desperate grip. There, scared, Izuku whispered, his eyes rolling back. Who? The quirks. Izuku's head lolled. They're all screaming. Then, the boy went limp. The Vanguard Action Squad rally point. Dabi stood on a tree branch, looking down at the forest. The blue flames in his hand flickered and died. He was shaking. He looked at his hand, annoyed. What is this? Below him, Twice was huddled in a ball, clutching his head. I feel split. No, I feel whole. I feel like I'm going to explode. Too much pressure. Toga was pale, her usual manic grin replaced by a look of confusion. Izuku, she whispered, shivering. He smells different. He smells like old blood. Even the Nomu, the mindless bioengineered weapon standing near the clearing, was agitated. It was pacing, screeching low in its throat, refusing to follow commands. Dabi looked toward the cliffside, where a faint pillar of smoke was rising. He had orders. Capture Bakugo. Kill any pros. But that feeling, that sudden, crushing weight that had just washed over the forest, it triggered an instinct Dabi didn't know he had. It was the same feeling he got when he stood too close to Sensei. All for one. Change of plans, Dabi said, his voice tight. Huh? Spinner looked up, his lizard skin pale. But we haven't got the target. Forget the target, Dabi hissed. Something is wrong. There's an asset here the doctor didn't tell us about. If we stay, we get crushed. Magna looked hesitant. But Shigaraki said, Shigaraki isn't here. Dabi snapped. He looked back at the cliff. The air still felt electrically charged. We're leaving. Signaled the retreat. Take the kid if you have him, otherwise we vanish. We're running away? Toga asked, disappointed. Dabi narrowed his eyes. We're surviving. That wasn't a hero. That was a monster. The void. Izuku was floating again, but not in the forest. He was in the dark place. The ground was made of black water. The sky was a swirling aurora of colors, red, purple, pink, green, orange. He tried to move, but he was held fast. Standing in front of him were 7 figures. They were no longer the shadowy, indistinct shapes he had seen in the sports festival. They were clear. High definition. A man with white hair and sickly skin looked at him with sad eyes. Yoichi. The first. Next to him, 2 men faced away, their backs turned, but their heads lowered in acknowledgement. The second and third. A man with strange scar markings on his face. The fourth. A muscular man with goggles. The fifth. A young man with a high collar. The sixth. A beautiful woman with a mole under her lip. Nana Shimura. The seventh. And behind them all, a flickering, ghostly form of All Might, made of golden flame, looking transparent and weak. You broke the lock, Yoichi said softly. His voice echoed like a church bell. Izuku tried to speak, but no words came out. He looked at his hands in the stream world. They were glowing white. We tried to hold it back, Nana said, stepping forward. She reached out, touching Izuku's cheek. Her hand felt warm. The singularity. It wasn't supposed to happen yet. Your body is too small. The vessel creates cracks. I had to, Izuku managed to say. He was going to kill Kota. We know, the 5th user said, crossing his arms. And you did well. You accessed the origin. The state of total unification. But there is a cost, the 4th user said. His voice was jittery, nervous. The origin is a beacon. You lit a flare in a dark room full of wolves. Yoichi stepped closer, until he was nose to nose with Izuku. My brother, Yoichi whispered. He heard you. Izuku froze. All for one. He knows you have awakened, Yoichi continued. The game has changed, ninth. You are no longer just a holder. You are the keystone. The world began to shake. The black water rippled violently. Wake up, Nana said urgently. You have to wake up. And you have to learn to close the door. If you open it again before you are ready, you will burn out. You will become nothing but energy. Wait! Izuku shouted. How? How do I control it? The second user, the man with the gauntlets who had his back turned his head slightly. One eye, sharp and red, glared at Izuku. Dominion, the second said. Don't ask the power for help. Command it. Tokyo, undisclosed location, the bar. Kurojiri was polishing a glass, though his hand trembled slightly. The monitor on the wall flickered to life. The screen was black, displaying only the word sound only. Master, Shigaraki Tamura said, scratching at his neck. The squad is returning. They failed. Dabi called a retreat. He said there was an anomaly. From the speakers, a voice emerged. It was deep, calm, and cultured. But tonight there was a new undertone. A ripple of genuine amusement. It is fine, Tamura, all for one said. Fine? They didn't get the Bakugo kid. Shigaraki slammed his hand on the counter, decaying the edge of the wood. We look weak. We have gained something far more valuable than a student, all for one replied. In the dark room where the villain sat, hooked up to his life support machines, the man with no face smiled. He raised his hand, staring at the palm. He could feel it. A resonance. A vibration in his own quirk genes that he hadn't felt in 100 years. It was the feeling of his little brother fighting back. The origin has awakened, all for one murmured to himself. The fruit has ripened early. He keyed the microphone again. Tamura. Prepare the doctor. We are accelerating the schedule. Sensei? The little brother is finally ready to play, all for one said, his voice practically purring with anticipation. I want to meet him. Soon. Mustafa General Hospital 2 days later. The beeping of the heart monitor was the first thing Izuku heard. He opened his eyes. The ceiling was white. The smell of antiseptic was sharp. He tried to sit up, but a wave of exhaustion pinned him down. He looked to his right. His arm was encased in a heavy, metallic cast, suspended by a sling. He couldn't feel it at all. It was numb, dead weight. Young Midoriya. The door slid open, and a skeletal figure rushed in. All Might. The former number 1 hero looked worse than usual. He was pale, sweating, and he looked thinner. As if some of his own life force had been siphoned away. All Might. Izuku croaked. Toshinori Yagi slumped into the chair beside the bed, burying his face in his hands. I was so worried. When Aizawa told me, when he described the energy, I couldn't stop it, Izuku whispered, tears pricking his eyes. I needed to save him. And then the door broke. All Might looked up. His blue eyes were serious, filled with a mix of pride and terror. I know, All Might said softly. I felt it. You felt it? We are connected, my boy. When you accessed that power, the embers inside me, they flared. All Might placed a hand on his own chest. It pulled at me. It was calling the rest of the power home. Izuku stared at him. Am I going to lose one for all? No, All Might shook his head. But you have changed it. Or rather, it has changed you. He pointed to a mirror on the wall. Look! Izuku turned his head slowly. He looked at his reflection. He looked mostly the same. Messy green hair, freckles. But there was a difference. His eyes. The deep green irises were now framed by a thin, permanent ring of gold. It was faint, but it was there. The mark of the singularity. The mark of the connection to the vestiges. What am I? Izuku asked, his voice trembling. All Might reached out and placed a large, bony hand on Izuku's uninjured shoulder. You are the 9th, All Might said. And I think, you might be the last. Outside the window, the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the city. But to Izuku, the shadows looked different. They looked like tendrils. He closed his hand, the left one, into a fist. He could feel the quirks inside him. Float. Danger sense. Black whip. and others sleeping, waiting to be woken up. They weren't tools anymore. They were parts of him, and somewhere out there, in the dark, he knew something was looking back. Izuku didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just stared at the golden rings in his eyes and realized that the boy who wanted to be a hero was gone. The vessel had broken. The origin had begun. The world did not go black for Izuku Midoriya. That would have been a mercy. Instead, the world expanded. He was lying face down in the dirt, his body a broken cage of bone and seared flesh, but his mind was untethered. The physical tether of consciousness had snapped, yet the metaphysical one, the connection to the origin, held fast, pulling him into a state of hyper-awareness that was more agonizing than the pain in his shattered arm. He was a radio tower with the volume knob ripped off. He was a lighthouse bulb burning at 10,000 watts in a room the size of a closet. He could feel the forest. Not just the texture of the soil against his cheek, or the smell of burning wood, but the life of it. He felt the panicked heartbeats of squirrels burrowing into the earth. He felt the sap moving sluggishly through the pines, and most violently he felt the quirks. To the awakened one for all, other quirks appeared as distinct, vibrant frequencies. They were like notes of music in a chaotic symphony, and right now, the orchestra was screaming. He felt the cold, jagged ice of Todoroki, a mile away. He felt the explosive, staccato rhythm of Bakugo's sweat glands, popping like gunfire. He felt the dark, shadowy depths of Tokoimi, currently consumed by a beast of his own making. But these were distant stars. Closer, there were others. Malignant ones, the lizard. Slippery, adhesive, terrified, the magnet. Polarity shifting wildly, a compass spinning out of control, the blue fire. Hot, hateful, consuming itself to burn others. Izuku wanted to scream, to tell them to be quiet, but his mouth wouldn't move. He was locked inside his own skull, forced to watch the radar screen of the battlefield. The singularity wasn't just a power boost, it was a breach in the wall that separated his soul from the world. He was leaking. And the world was leaking into him. And above it all, the voices of the vestiges were no longer whispering. They were working. Hold the line. The second user growled, his presence feeling like steel bands wrapping around Izuku's fraying sanity. Don't let the boy dissolve. The container is cracked. I'm trying. Nana Shimura's voice was weeping. The output is too high. He's broadcasting to the whole prefecture. Izuku lay in the dirt, the golden rings in his unconscious eyes glowing softly, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. He was a beacon in the night, and in the darkness of the woods, things were turning to look at the light. The forest, south sector, Spinner, Shuichi Iguchi, was not having a good time. He had joined the League of Villains to follow the ideology of staying. He wanted to purge the corrupt society of fake heroes. He wanted to change the world. He did not sign up to fight a natural disaster. Magna, Spinner hissed, pressing his back against the thick oak tree. Do you feel that? Kenji Hikishi, holding her giant magnet wrapped in cloth, looked pale. The usual confident swagger of the villainess was gone, replaced by a twitchy paranoia. She was rubbing her arms constantly, as if trying to brush off invisible spiders. The air pressure, Magna muttered. It's heavy. It feels like static electricity, but inside my teeth. It's coming from the cliff, Spinner said, gripping his sword made of belts and knives. The weapon felt unbelievably heavy in his hands. Where Muscular went. You don't think he... Muscular is a brute, Magna snapped, though her voice wavered. He makes noise. He breaks things. This isn't noise. This is suppression. They were supposed to be heading toward the rendezvous point. The plan was simple. The Vanguard Action Squad creates chaos, Dabi burns the forest to herd the students, and Mr. Compress captures the target, Katsuki Bakugo. But their path to the rendezvous took them past the base of the cliff. As they stepped into the clearing, the blast zone where Muscular had been launched, the sensation intensified tenfold. It wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a physical force. Whoa, Spinner gasped, dropping to one knee. His gecko quirk, which allowed him to cling to surfaces, suddenly engaged without his permission. His hands stuck to his own knees, his feet glued to the ground. What the hell? I can't move, my quirk. Magna's eyes widened in horror. The metal buckles on Spinner's sword began to rattle. Small rocks containing traces of iron ore started to float up from the ground, drawn toward Magna. "Stop it!" Spinner yelled. "I'm not doing it!" Magna shrieked. "It's doing it by itself. My polarity, it's going haywire." They stumbled forward, drawn like moths to a flame, until they saw it, or rather saw him. In the center of a crater that looked like it had been scooped out by a god's spoon, a boy lay face down. Smoke curled off his body, but it was the air around him that terrified them. For a radius of 20 meters around the boy, the world was distorted. It looked like the haze above hot asphalt in the summer. Leaves that drifted into the circle didn't just fall, they disintegrated into dust. "That's the green kid," Spinner whispered, fighting the urge to vomit. His reptilian instincts were screaming predator. Muscular was supposed to kill him. "Muscular isn't here," Magna whispered, pointing a shaking finger at the cliff face. Buried deep in the rock, 50 feet up, was a crater of gore and flesh that vaguely resembled the muscle-bound villain. He defeated Muscular? Spinner's mind couldn't process it. "A student did that? We have to kill him," Magna said. It wasn't a tactical decision. It was a panic response. "If we don't kill him now, he's going to wake up. And if he wakes up..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Magna stepped forward, raising her weapon. She tried to activate her magnetism to pull the boy toward her, to crush his skull. "Magnetism!" she shouted. Nothing happened. Or rather, the magnetism refused to leave her body. The red aura that usually surrounded her targets instead wrapped around her own throat. "Gah!" Magna choked, clawing at her neck. "Kneel!" The word didn't come from the boy's mouth. It resonated directly in their skulls. It was a command carried on a frequency that bypassed the ears and went straight to the amygdala. Spinner slammed face first into the dirt, his limbs locking up. Magna fell to her knees, gasping for air, the magnetic field around her throat dissipating instantly as she submitted. They lay there, two hardened criminals paralyzed by the unconscious presence of a 15-year-old boy. The beacon pulsed. Thrum, thrum, thrum. It was a heartbeat. It was the sound of one for all checking the perimeter. "Don't move," Spinner whimpered into the dirt. "If we move, it will notice us." The forest, central sector. Eraserhead was not a man prone to panic. He was logical. He was efficient. He was a tool of rationality in an irrational world. But tonight logic had left the building. He moved through the trees with the speed of a desperate man. His capture scarf whipped behind him, snagging on branches he didn't bother to dodge. "Midoriya!" he shouted, not caring if the villains heard him. When the shockwave had hit the forest minutes ago, Aizawa had felt it in his bones. He had seen the sky light up with that terrifying, prismatic white light. It wasn't fire. It wasn't electricity. It was pure energy, and he knew, with a sinking dread, exactly who was responsible. That child destroys his body every time he uses his power. But that light, that wasn't just a broken bone. That was a broken reality. He burst into the clearing and skid to a halt, the heels of his boots tearing up the grass. The scene before him froze his blood. The crater was massive. The devastation was absolute. It looked less like a quirk battle and more like an orbital bombardment. In the center lay Midoriya, and near the edge of the distortion field, two villains, the lizard and the magna user, were prostrate on the ground, shivering, refusing to look up. "Midoriya!" Aizawa rushed forward. As he crossed the invisible threshold of the 20-meter mark, he felt it. The air grew thick. It tasted metallic. The hair on his arms stood up, and a high-pitched whine filled his ears. It was the feeling of standing next to a high-voltage transformer that was about to blow. He reached the boy. Midoriya was a wreck. His right arm was a blackened ruin, the costume sleeve completely incinerated. The skin was cracked, glowing faintly red in the fissures. "Sensei." The voice was faint. Aizawa dropped to his knees. "Midoriya. Can you hear me?" Izuku's head turned slightly. His eyes were half open. Aizawa recoiled. The eyes were wrong. The pupils were blown wide, and the irises were encircled by gold. They weren't looking at Aizawa. They were looking through him. They were looking at the quirk factor inside Aizawa's DNA. So loud. Izuku mumbled, delirium thick in his voice. "Why is everyone so loud?" "Stay with me," problem child, Aizawa said, reaching for his radio. I need a medic at the North Cliff. Immediate evac. No. Izuku's left hand shot out, gripping Aizawa's wrist with surprising strength. Don't let them come close. I can't close the door. Aizawa looked at the boy's chest. Through the torn fabric of his gym uniform, Aizawa could see the veins glowing. Not green. White. The energy was churning under the skin, desperate to get out. He's losing control. If he releases that energy here, he'll kill us all. I'm going to stop it, Aizawa said firmly. I'm going to erase your quirk, Midoriya. Just relax. Aizawa activated erasure. His hair floated up. His eyes glowed red. He fixed his gaze on Izuku, focusing his intent on the quirk factor, intending to shut down the engine before it melted the car. He made visual contact. He reached out with his mind to snip the connection. Crack. It wasn't a sound. It was a sensation inside Aizawa's head. It felt like he had tried to stop a freight train with a fishing net. Gah! Aizawa was thrown backward, clutching his face. Blood streamed from his eyes, trickling down his cheeks like red tears. His quirk hadn't been erased. It had been refused. The density of One for All in its awakened state was simply too high. Erasure worked by blocking the activation signals of the quirk factor. But One for All wasn't just signaling anymore. It was overflowing. It was a flood. You can't erase a flood by closing a single tap. Aizawa gasped, blinking rapidly to clear the blood from his vision. His head was pounding with a migraine that made his vision swim. What the hell? Aizawa wheezed. Izuku seemed to convulse, arching his back. The white light flared brighter for a second, then dimmed. Sorry. Izuku whispered, a single tear cutting through the soot on his face. It's too heavy. Aizawa wiped the blood from his face. He realized then that this wasn't insubordination. The boy wasn't fighting him. The boy was a dam holding back an ocean, and Aizawa had just tried to plug a leak with his finger. He looked at the villains. Spinner and Magna were still on the ground, terrified. They hadn't attacked because they couldn't. They were in the presence of a predator so apex that their instincts forced them to play dead. Midoriya, Aizawa said, his voice softer, filled with a grim realization. You protected them all, didn't you? By becoming the target. He carefully scooped the boy up in his arms, avoiding the blackened right arm. As soon as Aizawa held him, the pressure seemed to focus. It didn't disappear, but it harmonized. Izuku's head rested against Aizawa's chest. Kota safe? He's safe, Aizawa lied. He didn't know for sure, but he had to say it. Rest now. That's an order. Izuku's eyes finally closed. The golden rings vanished beneath his eyelids. The distortion field faded, the leaves settling back to the ground. Spinner gasped, drawing in a huge breath of air as if he had been drowning. He scrambled backward, eyes wide. Monster. Spinner whispered. That's a monster. Aizawa glared at them, his red eyes terrifying even through the blood. Get lost. Before I decide to stop holding back. He didn't need to say it twice. The paralysis broken, Spinner and Magna scrambled into the dark woods, abandoning their mission, abandoning their dignity. They ran like rabbits. The Vanguard Action Squad, withdrawal point. Where is everyone? Dabi muttered, blue flames licking his fingers. He stood in a clearing near the center of the forest. Twice was pacing nervously beside him. Mr. Compress was perched on a tree branch, looking immaculate but shaken. We have the marbles, Mr. Compress said, holding up two small blue spheres. Tokoyami fumigage. And oh, wait. Compress paused. He juggled the marbles. I missed one. You what? Dabi turned, his staples straining as he scowled. The explosive one, Compress said, sounding genuinely perplexed. Bakugo. I was reaching for him. I had him in my sights. And then what? Then the light happened, Compress said quietly. That white flash from the mountain. For a split second, I flinched. My hand shook. I grabbed a rock instead. He tossed the marble in the air, and released it. Poof. A rock fell to the ground. You idiot, Dabi snarled. He raised his hand to incinerate the magician. The whole point of this mission was Bakugo. Wait. Twice jumped in, waving his hands. Don't burn him. Burn me. No, don't. But Dobby, listen, we can't go back. We can't go back there. Dobby looked toward the forest. He could still feel it. The pressure was fading, but the afterimage burned in his mind. His radio crackled. Dobby, Shigaraki's voice came through, distorted and angry. Why aren't you back yet? Kurojiri is waiting. We missed the target. Hand job, Dobby said flatly. Compress choked. Go back and get him. Shigaraki screamed. Send the Noma. Burn the whole forest down. Dobby looked at the Nomas standing motionless by the tree. The bioengineered weapon, designed to kill All Might, was currently trembling. A low, whining sound was coming from its beak. Even the Noma, a creature with no brain, knew better than to approach the origin point. No, Dobby said. What did you say to me? I said no, Dobby replied, a cold smile touching his scarred lips. Mission failed. We're scrubbing it. There's a hero asset here that wasn't in the briefing. Something anomalous. If we stay, we get wiped. Anomalous? Shigaraki paused. A beacon, Dobby said, looking at the distant lights of the ambulances approaching the mountain base. Something woke up in these woods, Shigaraki. And it scared the Noma. Think about that. There was silence on the other end. Then a click. A purple mist swirled into existence behind them. Kurojiri. Let's go, Dobby said, stepping into the void. He took one last look at the forest. Whatever that was. I hope it dies in the hospital. The villains vanished. The aftermath, emergency camp, the flashing red and blue lights of the police cars painted the forest in chaotic strokes. Class 1A was gathered near the buses. They were battered, bruised, and terrified. Katsuki Bakugo sat on the bumper of an ambulance, a blanket draped over his shoulders. He was staring at his hands. Bakugo? Kirishima asked tentatively, approaching him. You okay, man? You were really quiet. Bakugo didn't look up. He remembered the moment clearly. The villain in the mask had reached for him. He was about to be turned into a marble, to be kidnapped. He had seen the hand coming, and then the sky had turned white. A shockwave of pressure, a king's will, had washed over the clearing. The villain had flinched. The hand had missed by inches. Bakugo knew that pressure. He had felt a fraction of it during their fight against All Might in the final exams. He had felt a smaller version of it when Deku punched the giant robot in the entrance exam. But this was the ocean compared to a cup of water. It was him, Bakugo whispered. Who? Kirishima asked. Deku, Bakugo snarled, his hands curling into fists, igniting small explosions into the blanket. That damn nerd. Suddenly, the crowd parted. Make way! Critical patient coming through. 2 paramedics were sprinting, pushing a gurney. Aizawa ran alongside them, his face covered in dried blood, shouting orders. On the gurney lay Izuku. A collective gasp went through the students. Izuku looked small. Fragile. But the air around the gurney was hot. Heat waves radiated off his body. Ochako Uraraka covered her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. Deku-kun. Bakugo stood up. He walked toward the gurney as it passed. He saw the arm. The black, charred ruin of a limb. It looked like dead wood. But then he saw Izuku's face. Izuku's eyes were open, staring blindly at the sky. The golden rings were fading, but they were still visible, glowing like dying embers. As the gurney passed Bakugo, Izuku's head rolled to the side. His eyes met Bakugo's. For a second Bakugo felt a chill that went deeper than his bones. It wasn't recognition in those eyes. It was assessment. It was the look of a god looking at a mortal. Kaken. Izuku whispered, the word barely a breath. You're still here. Of course I'm here, you damn nerd! Bakugo shouted, his voice cracking. Where else would I be? Izuku didn't answer. His eyes rolled back, and he finally, truly passed out. The paramedics shoved the gurney into the back of the ambulance. Aizawa jumped in after them. The doors slammed shut. As the siren wailed and the ambulance sped away, Bakugo stood in the dust, trembling. He wasn't trembling from anger. He wasn't trembling from the cold. For the first time in his life, Katsuki Bakugo was trembling because he realized he had been left behind. Not by a villain, but by the boy who used to follow him. Deku hadn't just saved him. Deku had scared the villains away. "What the hell are you?" Bakugo whispered to the taillights fading in the distance. "The hospital, intensive care unit." The doctors were confused. "His heart rate is stabilizing, but look at the EEG," the chief surgeon said, pointing at the monitor. "Brain activity is off the charts. It looks like he's having a seizure, but there are no physical convulsions." "And the heat?" the nurse asked, changing the cooling packs around Izuku's body for the third time in an hour. "He's running a fever of 106 degrees. He should be dead. But his cells, they aren't dying, they're regenerating." "It's the quirk," the surgeon muttered. "Whatever his quirk is, it's consuming his metabolism to repair the damage. I've never seen output like this. It's like a nuclear reactor melting down and rebuilding itself at the same time." In the corner of the room, All Might stood in his skeletal form. He watched the doctors work. He knew they wouldn't find the answers in medical textbooks. The fever wasn't a sickness. It was the forging. The origin power was reshaping Izuku's body to be a better vessel. It was burning away the impurities, thickening the pathways, preparing him for the burden of the singularity. "Young Midoriya," All Might whispered. "You opened the box. Pandora is out." He looked at his own hand. The embers of One for All were fading faster now. Before tonight, he thought he had maybe 6 months left of the embers. Now? He felt drained. Hollow. The origin was jealous. It wanted all the power back. It was siphoning the remnants from All Might to feed the new king. Tartarus prison. Deep beneath the sea, in the most secure facility on the planet, a man sat in darkness. He was strapped to a chair. Sensors monitored his every breath. Guns were trained on him from every angle. All for One smiled. It was a wide, toothy smile that would have terrified the guards if they could see it clearly through the monitors. He closed his eyes, or rather, the scar tissue where his eyes used to be. He reached out with his own quirk. All for One. The power to take and give, and across the miles he felt the resonance. It was faint, like a radio signal from another continent, but it was there. A harmonic frequency that matched his own. One for All. For generations the quirk had been a silent ghost, hiding from him. His brothers had been quiet, passive, simply passing the torch. But tonight, the ghost had screamed. "You're awake," All for One said to the empty room. The guard behind the glass stiffened. "Prisoner 8990. Who are you speaking to?" "My brother," All for One replied pleasantly. "He's been sleeping for a very long time. But he just had a nightmare." The villain chuckled, a low sound that vibrated against the reinforced glass. "The beacon is lit," he mused. "And now, I know exactly where to find him." He tapped his finger against the armrest of his chair. "Come to me, Ninth. The stage is set. The actors are ready. Let us see if your light can survive my darkness." The singularity had begun. And in the shadows of Tartarus, the Demon King began to plan his welcome party. The concept of waking up implies a return to consciousness, a surfacing from deep water to the air above. But for Izuku Midoriya, there was no surface. There was only the ocean. He was standing on a floor made of obsidian glass, perfectly smooth, stretching out into an infinite horizon. Beneath his feet, deep within the black glass, currents of multicolored light flowed like subterranean rivers, crimson, azure, neon green, and a blinding, pulsating gold. The sky above was not the void he remembered from his previous, fleeting glimpses of the vestige world. It was a tempest. Swirling clouds of nebulous energy clashed and merged, casting shifting shadows over the dark floor. Izuku looked down at his hands. They were translucent, glowing with a soft, white luminescence. He wasn't wearing his torn gym uniform. He was wearing a suit made of light, simple, form-fitting, vaguely resembling the hero costume his mother had bought him, but refined, perfected. "It is quiet here," Izuku whispered. His voice didn't echo. It was absorbed by the vastness. "That is because you are finally listening," a voice replied. Izuku spun around. In the past, the vestiges had been smudges of ink, silhouettes obscured by static and shadow. He had seen glowing eyes, maybe a vague outline of hair, but never more. Now, the static was gone. 7 thrones arranged in a semicircle rose from the obsidian floor. They weren't ornate chairs of gold and velvet. They were jagged, formed from the crystallized memories of the past. Some looked like piles of rubble, others like twisted metal, others like smooth, weathered stone, and sitting upon them were the kings and queens of One for All. Yoichi. Izuku breathed, recognizing the white-haired man in the center. The first user, Yoichi Shigaraki, offered a gentle, sad smile. He looked frail, his skin pale and sickly, but his eyes burned with an intensity that anchored the entire realm. Welcome back, Ninth, Yoichi said. Or perhaps I should say, welcome home. Izuku took a step forward, his legs trembling. I broke it. The door. In the forest. You didn't break it, kid, said a gruff voice from the far left. Daigoro Banjo, the fifth user. He was a mountain of a man, wearing a leather jacket and goggles, leaning back with a casual swagger that belied the tension in the room. You kicked it off the hinges. It was premature, came a sharp, analytical voice. The fourth user, Haiku Shinomori, sat with perfect posture. The cracks on his face, scars of the burden that had killed him, seemed to glow. Your body wasn't ready for the singularity. You forced a hardware update on a system that was still running Windows 95. He saved the boy, Nana Shimura cut in. She sat to Yoichi's right, her presence warm and maternal, yet radiating a steel-like strength. Her cape fluttered in a wind that Izuku couldn't feel. He did what a hero does. He acted. Izuku looked at them, overwhelmed. I can see you. All of you. Clearly. The awakening clears the signal. A man with a high collar, the sixth user, N said softly. Before you were looking at us through a dirty window. Now the glass is gone. Izuku's gaze drifted to the two figures at the end of the arc. The second and third users. In the past, they had turned their backs on him, facing the wall, refusing to acknowledge him. They were facing him now. The third user looked cautious, his arms crossed. But the second user, the man with the gauntlets, and the scar running down his face. He was leaning forward, his elbows on his knees, staring at Izuku with a look of intense scrutiny. So, the second user said. His voice sounded like grinding stones. This is the vessel that finally cracked the code. I didn't mean to, Izuku stammered, feeling small under the man's gaze. I needed more power. I needed to be stronger than muscular. And so you accessed the origin, the second user stated. He stood up, walking down the steps of his throne to stand before Izuku. He was tall, imposing, smelling faintly of gunpowder and old blood. Do you understand what you did, Ninth? Do you understand what you are now? Izuku shook his head. All Might said, he said I was a stockpiler. A battery, that was true. Until 2 nights ago, Yoichi interjected, stepping down to join them. One for All began as a simple exchange. My brother gave me a quirk to stockpile power, which merged with my quirk to pass it on. For 8 generations, we were a relay race. We passed the baton, adding our speed to the next runner. Yoichi gestured to the swirling sky above. But a cup can only hold so much water before it overflows. We theorized the quirk singularity, the point where the accumulated power becomes too complex, too dense for a human body to contain. We thought it would happen to the 10th. Or the 11th. But you are reckless, the second user grunted, though there was a hint of begrudging respect in his tone. Your desperation acted as a catalyst. You didn't just access the stockpile. You accessed the core. Yoichi placed a hand on Izuku's chest. One for All has evolved, Izuku. It is no longer just a power stockpiling quirk. The world around them shifted. The obsidian floor dissolved, replaced by a complex, glowing web of interconnected lines, like a nervous system made of stars. It is now a harmonizing quirk, Yoichi declared. Harmonizing? Izuku asked. You are a conduit, Nana explained, stepping up beside him. Before, we were separate voices screaming in a room. Now you are the conductor. You have the ability to synchronize our quirks, to use them in tandem without switching gears. You can layer float over Black Whip, infuse FA gene into the air pressure of the second's gear shift. But it's more than that, the fourth user added from his throne. The origin power, it exerts pressure. You felt it in the forest, didn't you? The villains stopped. Their quirks malfunctioned. Izuku nodded slowly, the memory returning. Magna, her magnetism. It turned on her. And muscular, his fibers just dissolved. That is the king's will, the second user said darkly. One for all has become so dense that it possesses its own gravitational pull. When you enter the origin state, your quirk factor becomes a black hole. Lesser quirks, weaker wills, are disrupted in your presence. You dominate the local reality. Izuku looked at his hands, horror dawning on him. That sounds like him. Like All for One. The room went silent. It is, Yoichi admitted softly. We are two sides of the same coin, ninth. My brother takes power by force. You command power through unity. But the result, the pressure it exerts on the world? It is terrifyingly similar. I don't want to be a villain, Izuku whispered. I don't want people to be afraid of me. Then learn to throttle it, the second user snapped. He pointed a gauntlet finger at Izuku's chest. Right now you are a fire hose that has been turned on full blast, flailing around, destroying everything nearby. If you try to use the origin state again with your current body, you won't just break an arm, you will burn out. You will become a star for 1 second, and then you will be ash. Your body is adapting, the fifth user, Banjo, said, trying to sound encouraging. But it takes time. You have to build the valve. You have to learn to keep the door closed and only open a window. How? Izuku asked. By imposing your will, Nana said. Not the will to save. The will to rule your own power. You must be the king of this court, Izuku. Not a guest. Suddenly, the realm began to shake. The colors in the sky turned violent. You're waking up, Yoichi said urgently. The physical world is calling you back. Listen to me, Izuku. Do not reach for the white light again. Stick to the green sparks. If you touch the white light before your bones harden, you die. Wait. Izuku reached out. All Might. Is he okay? The vestiges began to fade, retreating back into the light. Tashinori. Nana's voice drifted away, filled with a profound sorrow. He is paying the price for your ascension. Go to him. Mustafa General Hospital, room 304. Tashinori Yagi felt cold. It was a deep, marrow-seeping chill that no amount of blankets could fix. He sat in the plastic chair next to Izuku's bed, his skeletal frame hunched over. For months, ever since Kamino, ever since he met Izuku, he had felt the embers of one for all slowly fading. It was like a candle burning down to the wick. He had expected it to last another year, maybe 2, providing him with just enough strength to maintain his muscle form for a few seconds a day, just enough to be a symbol, however diminished. But 2 nights ago, the candle hadn't just burned down. It had been sucked into a vacuum. When Izuku had awakened the origin in the forest, Tashinori had felt a physical lurch in his chest. It was as if a hook had snagged the remaining power inside him and ripped it out. He looked at his hand. He tried to flex, to summon the familiar warmth of the power. Nothing. Not a spark. Not a wisp of smoke. He was empty. All Might? Tashinori jumped slightly. He turned to see Inko Midoriya standing in the doorway. She looked exhausted, her eyes red and puffy, holding a thermos of tea. Mrs. Midoriya, Tashinori stood up, his joints creaking. Please sit. You've been pacing the hallway for hours. Inko walked into the room, her eyes fixed on her son. Izuku lay amidst a web of tubes and wires. His right arm was encased in a futuristic-looking cast, a dense polymer designed by David Shield, meant to hold the arm together while the bones knit. The doctor. Inko's voice trembled. The specialist from Tokyo. He told me something strange. Tashinori stiffened. What did he say? Inko sat on the edge of the bed, brushing a lock of green hair from Izuku's forehead. He said Izuku's bone density is changing. He said his cells are densifying. Like he's evolving in real time. He said it looks less like healing and more like metamorphosis. She looked up at Tashinori, tears spilling over. What is happening to my baby? He's always been hurt. He's always broken his bones, but this, the energy reading they found in the forest, it wasn't normal. Even for a hero. Tashinori looked at the floor. He couldn't tell her the whole truth. He couldn't tell her that her son was becoming a vessel for a century-old ghost war. He is growing, Tashinori said, choosing his words carefully. His quirk is maturing faster than we anticipated. It is a heavy burden, Mrs. Midoriya. Heavier than mine was. I don't care about the burden, Inko cried softly. I care about his life. When I saw him on that gurney, he looked like he was burning from the inside out. He was, Toshinori admitted. And he survived. Because he is strong. Stronger than me. And that is why I am afraid, Toshinori thought. Because a vessel that strong attracts the ultimate breaker. Suddenly, the heart monitor beeped faster. Beep, 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 beep. Izuku? Inko gasped, grabbing his hand. On the bed, Izuku's fingers twitched. His chest heaved, taking in a sharp, jagged breath. Young Midoriya! Toshinori leaned in. Izuku's eyelids fluttered. He groaned, a sound of deep, physical ache. Then, his eyes snapped open. Inko gasped and recoiled slightly. Toshinori froze. The eyes were green. But perfectly circling the pupil, embedded in the iris, was a ring of solid, luminescent gold. It wasn't a reflection of the light in the room. It was a light coming from within. Izuku stared at the ceiling for a long moment, his breathing regulating. He blinked, and the golden rings dimmed slightly, but did not disappear. Mom? Izuku rasped. His voice sounded like he had swallowed gravel. Oh, Izuku! Inko collapsed onto his chest, weeping. You're awake! You're awake! Izuku winced as she hugged him, but he lifted his left arm, weakly, to pat her back. I'm okay, Mom. I'm sorry. Don't you apologize. She sobbed. Just don't scare me like that again. Izuku looked over his mother's shoulder. His gaze locked onto Toshinori. Toshinori felt a shiver run down his spine. It wasn't the look of a student seeking approval anymore. It was a look of shared knowledge. All Might, Izuku whispered. I am here, my boy, All Might said, forcing a smile. I saw them, Izuku said softly, so his mother wouldn't understand. I saw everyone. Toshinori nodded slowly. I know, and... Izuku's eyes drifted to Toshinori's chest. You're empty. It wasn't a question. It was an observation made by someone who could now see the flow of energy. Toshinori slumped slightly. Yes. The awakening, it recalled the loan. Izuku closed his eyes, guilt flashing across his face. I stole it from you. No, Toshinori said firmly, stepping forward and placing a hand on Izuku's head. You didn't steal it. You inherited it. Fully. The training wheels are off, Izuku. I have nothing left to give you physically. I am just a man now. You're still my hero, Izuku said fiercely, opening his eyes again. The gold flared. And you, Toshinori whispered, are becoming the king. UA High School, Heights Alliance dorms, under construction. Because of the attack on the training camp, the implementation of the dorm system had been accelerated. Construction bots and heroes like Cementos were working around the clock. Inside the temporary housing unit, Class 1A sat in the common area. The mood was somber. They said he woke up, Ida said, adjusting his glasses. He was vibrating with anxiety. Aizawa-sensei sent the message 10 minutes ago. Oh, thank God, Uraraka breathed, collapsing back onto the sofa. I was so worried. The way he looked like a corpse that was still moving, Mineta shivered. And did you feel it? In the woods? That pressure? Bakugo was sitting in the corner, staring at the wall. He hadn't spoken since they got back. It wasn't just pressure, Tokoyami said darkly. Dark Shadow was currently hiding inside Tokoyami's cloak, refusing to come out. It was dominance. Dark Shadow is still terrified. He says the white light tried to eat him. Eat him? Kaminari asked nervously. Dude, Deku's quirk is super strength, not, whatever that is it? Todoroki asked quietly. Everyone turned to look at the dual quirk user. My ice, Todoroki said, looking at his right hand. When the shockwave hit, my ice shattered. Not from impact. It shattered because the structure of the ice failed. It was like the laws of physics around us got rewritten for a second. That's impossible, Yaoyorosa said, though she looked uncertain. Quirks follow biological and physical laws. Maybe his doesn't anymore, Ajiri croaked. The door to the dorms slammed open. Kirishima walked in, looking frustrated. I tried to visit him, Kirishima said. Security is insanely tight. There are police drones guarding his window. And get this, Endeavor is there. Endeavor? Todoroki frowned. Why is my father there? Apparently, the HPSC, Hero Public Safety Commission, sent him. Kirishima lowered his voice. I heard the nurses talking. They aren't treating Midoriya like a patient. They're classifying him as a strategic asset. Bakugo stood up abruptly. The chair screeched against the floor. Where are you going, Bakugo? Ida asked. To train, Bakugo snarled. If that nerd is going to become a god, then I have to become a god killer. I'm not getting left behind, he stormed out. Mustafa General Hospital. That night, the room was dark. Inko had finally been convinced to go home and shower, leaving Izuku alone, or almost alone. Izuku lay in the bed, staring at his right hand. He was trying to do what the second user had said. Build the valve. He visualized the hallway in his mind. He visualized the door he had smashed. He imagined rebuilding it, brick by brick, reinforcing it with steel. It was exhausting. Mental imagery usually came easily to him, but the origin power fought back. It wanted to flow. It was a river that hated the dam. Stay back, Izuku commanded mentally. Only 5%. Just the sparks. No white light. The energy receded, grumbling. You're awake. Izuku turned his head. Standing on the balcony outside his window was Shota Aizawa. Sensei, Izuku tried to sit up. Don't move, Aizawa said, sliding the window open and stepping inside. He looked ragged. The bandage around his head covered one eye, but the other eye was bloodshot. Your eye? Izuku winced. I did that, didn't I? Aizawa touched the bandage. You broke the capillaries in my retina. And you gave me a migraine that lasted for 24 hours. But I'll live. He pulled up a chair and sat down. We need to talk, Midoriya. About what happened in the woods. I saved Kota, Izuku said defensively. I know. And you defeated Muscular. And you scared off the Vanguard Action Squad, Aizawa listed them off. But you also nearly killed yourself. And you exerted a force that neutralized the quirks of 2 villains and traumatized half your class. Izuku looked down at his sheets. I couldn't control it. It just happened. I know, Aizawa said, his voice softer than usual. And that's why we have a problem. The Hero Commission knows. Izuku looked up. The Commission? They know that your quirk isn't just super strength. They saw the readings. They saw the footage from the camp cameras before they melted. Aizawa leaned forward. They are going to want to use you, Midoriya. They see a weapon. A deterrent. I'm not a weapon, Izuku said firmly. I'm a hero. Then you need to prove it, Aizawa said. The provisional license exam is coming up. The commission wanted to pull you from it, to put you in protective custody, which is code for a lab. Izuku gripped the sheets. I fought for you, Aizawa continued. I told them that if they tried to cage you, they'd lose you. I told them that the best way to control a force of nature is to teach it ethics. So, you're taking the exam. Really? Yes. But there are conditions. You are moved into the dorms immediately. You are under 24/7 surveillance by me or All Might. And... Aizawa paused. You are forbidden from accessing that white state again. If I see even a flicker of that prismatic light, I am pulling you from the field immediately. Do you understand? Yes, sir, Izuku said. I understand. Good. Aizawa stood up. He walked to the window. One more thing. He stopped, his back to Izuku. Whatever that power is, it's lonely, isn't it? Izuku blinked. Sir, I felt it when I touched you, Aizawa said quietly. It felt ancient. And sad. Don't let it eat you, Midoriya. You're a human being first. Don't forget that. Aizawa hopped out the window and vanished into the night. The mindscape, the assembly. Izuku closed his eyes. He didn't sleep. He went back to the throne room. The vestiges were waiting. He's right, you know, Nana said. The commission is dangerous. I don't care about the commission, Izuku said. He walked to the center of the room, standing on the glowing nervous system of the floor. He looked at the second user. Teach me, Izuku said. The second user raised an eyebrow. Teach you what? Teach me how to dominate, Izuku said, his voice hardening. If this power is a king's power, then I need to learn how to rule. I can't be a vessel anymore. I have to be the monarch. The second user smirked. It was a sharp, dangerous expression. Finally, the second said. The boy grows a spine. He stepped down, his gauntlets clicking. Lesson 1, the second said, the room darkening around them. The king does not ask for permission. He takes. He lunged at Izuku. Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't dodge. He stood his ground, and in the mental world, he imagined a wall. Boom! The second user hit the invisible barrier and skidded back. Good, the second user laughed. Again. The next morning, when the nurses came in to check on Izuku, they found him sitting on the edge of the bed. He had unhooked his own IVs. He was standing on his own 2 feet. Mr. Midoriya! You shouldn't be up! The nurse cried. Izuku turned to look at her. The golden rings in his eyes were bright, almost spinning. I'm fine, Izuku said. His voice was calm. Unnaturally calm. Please tell All Might I'm ready to go to the dorms. He raised his hand. The glass of water on the bedside table rattled. He focused. Throttle. 1%. The water stopped rattling. Izuku clenched his fist. He could feel them. All of them. The black whip coiled in his wrist. The float in his spine. The danger sense in his brain stem. They were loud. They were chaotic. Quiet, he commanded, and inside his soul, the 7 ghosts fell silent. Izuku Midoriya walked out of the hospital room. He walked differently now. His stride was heavier, more grounded. He walked like someone who was carrying the weight of the world, and had decided that the world wasn't heavy enough. The assembly was complete. The king had taken his throne. The bus ride to the newly constructed Heights Alliance dormitories was silent. It wasn't the comfortable silence of exhausted students returning from a trip. It was the heavy, pressurized silence of a congregation sitting next to a loaded bomb. Izuku Midoriya sat in the back row. He was alone. The seat next to him was empty. Uraraka had tried to sit there, offering a brave smile, but as she approached, her gravity quirk had malfunctioned. She had started to float 2 feet away from him, her stomach lurching with nausea. Izuku had gently told her it was okay, that he needed space. He looked out the window, watching the trees of the UA campus blur by. They are afraid. The second user's voice echoed in his mind. It was crisp, clear, as if the man were sitting right next to him wearing a headset. I know, Izuku thought back. Good. Fear creates distance. Distance creates safety. You are a reactor leaking radiation, 9th. Keep them away, don't be so harsh. Yoichi's voice chimed in, softer, like a breeze. He is a child, not a weapon. He needs his friends. He is a king. The second retorted. And kings don't have friends. They have subjects. Izuku clenched his jaw, the golden rings in his eyes flaring briefly behind his eyelids. Quiet. Both of you. The voices subsided, retreating into the hum of the origin. That was his life now, a constant conference call with 7 ghosts who had very strong opinions on how he should breathe, walk, and exist. The bus hissed to a halt in front of the massive, gleaming structure of Heights Alliance. All right, listen up. Aizawa's voice cut through the tension. He stood at the front of the bus, his bandages still fresh, his one visible eye scanning the students. Get your bags. Room assignments are posted in the lobby. You have 3 hours to unpack before the briefing in the common room. Move. The students filed out. Izuku waited until everyone else had exited before standing up. He grabbed his yellow backpack with his left hand. His right arm, encased in the heavy, black compression cast, hung uselessly at his side. He stepped off the bus. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the pavement. As Izuku walked toward the entrance, he passed by Yuga Aoyama. ZZZZT. Aoyama's naval laser belt flickered. A small beam of light shot out, fizzled, and died. Aoyama gasped, clutching his stomach. Mon Dieu! My sparkle! It stuttered. Izuku didn't stop. He kept walking. He passed Tokoyami. Dark shadow, usually bold in the dimming light, shrieked and retracted fully into Tokoyami's chest. He's burning! Dark shadow whimpered audibly. Too bright. The white star is too bright. Tokoyami looked at Izuku with wide, fearful eyes clutching his chest. Midoriya. Izuku paused at the door. He looked back at his classmates. They were staring at him. Not with malice, but with the wary respect one gives to a tiger that has escaped its cage. I'm sorry, Izuku whispered. He walked inside. The automatic doors slid shut behind him, sealing him in his new castle. The common room, 7 p.m. The Heights Alliance common room was designed to be cozy. Plush sofas, warm lighting, a large kitchen area. It was meant to foster unity. Tonight, it felt like a courtroom. Izuku sat on a single armchair in the corner. He had a book open on his lap, but he wasn't reading. He was focusing on his breathing. Inhale. Contain. Exhale. Harmonize. The air around him felt dense. The carpet beneath his chair was flattened, as if an invisible weight were pressing down on it. Across the room, the rest of Class 1A was trying to act normal. Kaminari and Ciro were playing a video game, but the volume was turned down low. Yaoyorozu was making tea, her movements stiff. So, Kirishima said, his voice a little too loud. The rooms are pretty big, right? Way better than my house. Indeed, Ida replied, chopping his hand, though the motion lacked its usual vigor. It is a generous allocation of resources by UA to ensure our safety. Izuku turned a page. The paper crinkled loudly in the quiet room. Kaminari flinched. His character on the screen died. Damn it, Kaminari muttered. He looked over at Izuku. Hey, Midoriya? Izuku looked up. The ambient light caught the gold in his eyes. Yeah, Kaminari? You doing okay over there? You've been staring at the same page for 20 minutes. I'm just thinking, Izuku said gently. Right. Thinking. Kaminari laughed nervously. He scratched his head. Hey, weird question. Is it just me, or does the air taste like copper? Whenever I look at you, it's the ozone, the fourth user, Haikage, whispered in Izuku's ear. Your bioelectric field is ionizing the air. Dial it back, ninth. You're at 3%. Drop to 1%, Izuku concentrated. He visualized a heavy iron door slamming shut in his mind. He pulled the energy inward, wrapping it tightly around his bones. The taste of copper faded. The oppressive weight in the room lifted slightly. Sorry, Izuku said again. It seemed to be the only word he knew lately. It's fine. Uraraka chirped, walking over with a tray of tea. She was determined to bridge the gap. She set the tray down on the table near him. Here, Deku-kun. Green tea. Thanks, Uraraka, Izuku smiled. It was a genuine smile, but it looked tired. He reached for the cup with his left hand. As his fingers brushed the ceramic, a spark of black energy, black whip, jumped from his fingertip to the cup. It wasn't an attack, it was a reflex. The whip coiled around the handle for a microsecond before vanishing. Clink, the cup cracked. Tea seeped out onto the saucer. Uraraka jumped back. Oh, Izuku pulled his hand back. I didn't mean to. It's okay. Uraraka grabbed a napkin. It's just a spill. I'll clean it. Don't touch it, Izuku said sharply. The command came out harder than he intended. It had the weight of the king's will behind it. Uraraka froze, her hand hovering over the napkin. The room went deathly silent. Izuku closed his eyes. Damn it! Fifth, keep the whip inside. It ain't me, kid, Banjo replied. It's you. Your emotions are leaking. You're anxious, so the quirk is anxious. Izuku opened his eyes. He looked at Uraraka's stunned face. I'm sorry, Uraraka. It's dangerous right now. I'll clean it. He didn't touch the cup. He didn't use a towel. He simply looked at the spilled tea. Float. The liquid lifted off the table, forming a perfect sphere of brown water in the air. Izuku guided it gently into the trash can, then dropped it. He stood up. I'm going to my room, he said softly. I'm ruining the mood. Deku, wait, Uraraka started. Let him go, round face. The voice was low, guttural, and vibrating with suppressed rage. Katsuki Bakugo stood at the entrance to the kitchen. He was leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed. His eyes were fixed on Izuku with a laser-like intensity. Kaken, Izuku acknowledged him. You're not running away, Bakugo growled, pushing off the wall. He stalked into the center of the room. We need to talk. Now. We can talk later, Izuku said, turning toward the elevator. No. We talk now. Bakugo's hand smoked. Pop. Everyone's been tiptoeing around you like you're made of glass. Or like we're made of glass. It's pissing me off. Bakugo, calm down, Kirishima interjected, standing up. He just got out of the hospital. He's not hurt, Bakugo spat. Look at him. Does he look hurt to you? He looks like he's holding back a laugh. Izuku turned around slowly. I'm not laughing, Kaken. Then what are you doing? Bakugo shouted, pointing a finger at him. You saved me in the woods with some bullshit light show. You scare off the villains. You break the mountain. And now you sit here, drinking tea, pretending you aren't looking down on us? I don't look down on you, Izuku said calmly. Liar! Bakugo stepped closer. The smell of nitroglycerin spiked in the room. You've always looked down on me. Even when you were quirkless. But now it's worse. Now you look at me like I'm an ant that you're trying not to step on. The truth of the statement hung in the air, because Bakugo was right. The danger sense in Izuku's head wasn't even registering Bakugo as a threat. To the origin power, Bakugo was just noise. I don't want to fight you, Izuku said. Well, I want to fight you. Bakugo yelled. Right now. Outside. Gym Gamma. Unless you're too high and mighty to spar with us extras? Bakugo. Ida shouted. That is enough. Fighting without permission is expulsion. I permit it. The shadows in the corner of the room shifted. Aizawa stepped out from behind a bookshelf. He looked tired, sipping from a jelly pouch. Sensei? Ida blinked. You condone this? Midoriya needs to test his new limits in a controlled environment, Aizawa said flatly. And Bakugo needs to blow off steam before he bursts the vessel. We're going to Gym Gamma. Get your gear. Aizawa looked at Izuku. His single visible eye was hard. Show me what you learned, Midoriya. But if you lose control, I'm shutting you down. Izuku looked at his hand. He clenched it. He challenges the king. The second user whispered, sounding amused. Accept the duel? Okay, Izuku said. Let's go. Gym Gamma 8 p.m. The vast concrete labyrinth of Gym Gamma was illuminated by high-powered floodlights. The rest of Class 1A stood on the observation deck, pressed against the reinforced glass. Down on the floor, two figures stood 30 meters apart. Bakugo was in his hero costume, his grenadier gauntlets equipped. He was stretching his neck, his face a mask of feral concentration. Izuku was wearing his gym uniform. He hadn't bothered with his costume. It felt restrictive. Rules are simple, Aizawa's voice boomed over the PA system. Incapacitation or surrender. No lethal force. Begin. Boom. Bakugo didn't wait. He launched himself with an explosion behind his back, clearing the distance in a second. Die. He swung a right hook, enhanced by a point-blank explosion. It was fast. Faster than he had ever been. Bakugo had been training too. Izuku watched the fist coming. To the naked eye, it was a blur. To Izuku, it was moving through molasses. Third user, FA Gene. Normally, FA Gene required repetitive motion to build up kinetic energy, squats, arm swings. But the origin power had changed the mechanics. The singularity meant that the energy of simply existing, the heartbeat, the breathing, the flow of blood, was constantly being harvested and stockpiled by FA Gene. Izuku didn't need to charge up. He was always charged. He didn't dodge. He simply shifted. One moment, Izuku was in front of the fist. The next, he was standing 2 feet to the left. No blur. No sound of movement. He just appeared there. Bakugo's punch hit empty air. The explosion rattled the floor, but Bakugo stumbled, his momentum carrying him forward. What? Bakugo hissed, spinning around with a leg sweep. Izuku hopped over it. He was floating. Just an inch off the ground. Float was active passively, negating his weight. Is that all? Izuku asked. He didn't mean to sound arrogant. He was genuinely asking. He wanted to know if this was the maximum threat level. Don't mock me! Bakugo roared. He unleashed a barrage. Stun grenade. AP shot. Howitzer impact. Explosions filled the gym. Concrete pillars shattered. Smoke filled the air. Up on the observation deck, Kirishima gripped the railing. Bakugo is going all out. He's gonna kill him. No, Todoroki said, his eyes narrowed. Look! The smoke cleared. Izuku was standing in the center of the crater. He hadn't moved. His right arm, the broken one, was still at his side. His left hand was raised, palm open. A web of black energy was spread out in front of him like a shield. Black whip. But the whips had woven themselves together into a dense, vibrating mesh. The explosions had hit the mesh and dissipated. How? Bakugo panted, smoke rising from his gauntlets. How are you doing that? You couldn't use the black stuff like that last week. It's not me, Izuku said. They're protecting me. Who? The past, Izuku replied cryptically. Stop talking in riddles. Bakugo screamed. He pulled the pin on his gauntlet. The big one. The one that could destroy a building. Bakugo, stop. All Might's voice came over the comms. That's too dangerous. He can take it. Bakugo yelled. If he's the chosen one, he can take it. He fired. The massive blast of concentrated nitroglycerin roared across the gym. A tunnel of fire and force. Izuku looked at the incoming fire. Second, Izuku thought. Gear shift, affirmative. The second user replied. Target the air. Shift speed to low. Apply resistance. Izuku punched the air with his left fist. He didn't hit the fire. He hit the space in front of the fire. Gear shift, low gear. He imposed a rule on the air molecules in front of him. Slow down. The air became a solid wall. The blast hit the invisible barrier and bloomed outward, splashing harmlessly to the sides like water hitting a pane of glass. The fire washed around Izuku, leaving him untouched in the eye of the storm. As the flames died down, Bakugo stood there, his arms still outstretched, his eyes wide with disbelief. His strongest attack. Nullified. Without a scratch, Izuku walked forward. He walked through the smoke. My turn, Izuku said. He disappeared. He didn't use 100%. He didn't need to. He used 45%, combined with the stored kinetic energy of Fa Gene, and the weightlessness of float. He appeared directly in front of Bakugo. Nose to nose, Bakugo flinched. He tried to ignite a spark in his palm to blast Izuku away. Spark. Nothing happened. Bakugo stared at his hand. What? Spark. Nothing. He looked at Izuku. Izuku's eyes were glowing furiously. The golden rings were spinning. The pressure was immense. The king's will. Izuku wasn't erasing Bakugo's quirk. He was suppressing it. The sheer density of the origin power was disrupting the electrical signals in Bakugo's sweat glands. Izuku was subconsciously commanding the nitroglycerin not to ignite. It won't work, Izuku whispered. Not while I'm looking at you. Bakugo trembled. For the first time in his life, he felt truly powerless. He was looking at a mountain that he couldn't climb. He couldn't even dynamite it. Why? Bakugo choked out. Why are you so far ahead? I'm not ahead, Kaken, Izuku said sadly. He placed his left hand on Bakugo's chest. I'm just somewhere else. He pushed. It was a gentle push. But Fa Gene released a fraction of its stored energy. Bam! Bakugo was launched backward. He flew 50 feet, skipping across the concrete like a stone across a pond, until he hit the back wall and slid down, unconscious. Silence descended on Gym Gamma. Izuku stood alone in the center of the arena. The smoke swirled around him, but refused to touch him. Winner, Midoriya, Aizawa's voice said over the speaker. It sounded hollow. Izuku looked up at the observation deck. He saw his classmates. Mina had her hands over her mouth. Cyril looked pale. Todoroki looked fascinated and terrified. They weren't cheering. You don't cheer when a natural disaster happens. You just survive it. Izuku lowered his head. Are you happy now? He asked the second user. Content, the second replied. The hierarchy is established. Outside Gym Gamma 9 p.m. Izuku walked out of the gym, toweling off sweat that wasn't there. He hadn't exerted himself. That was the scary part. Young Midoriya. Izuku stopped. All Might was standing under a street lamp, wearing his oversized yellow suit. He looked skeletal, his face shadowed. All Might, Izuku said. I didn't hurt him too bad. He'll wake up in a few minutes. I know, All Might said. Young Bakugo is tough. His pride will hurt longer than his ribs. All Might gestured to a black car parked nearby. Come with me. We need to go for a ride. Where? Somewhere quiet. Away from the cameras. Away from the ears of the dorms. Izuku got in the car. They drove in silence for 20 minutes, heading away from the city, up a winding mountain road that overlooked Mustafa. All Might parked at a scenic overlook, usually used by couples, but empty tonight. The city lights twinkled below, a sea of normalcy. All Might leaned against the hood of the car. Izuku stood beside him. You dominated him, All Might said softly. I didn't mean to suppress his quirk, Izuku confessed. It just happened. When I focused on him, his power felt dim. And I just turned it off. That is the power of the origin, All Might sighed. The first user told me about it in a dream, long ago. A theoretical power. The ability to resonate with all quirks. To give, to take, or to silence. All Might reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, secured tablet. This is why I brought you here. This was sent to the Tartarus security feed yesterday. It was encrypted on a frequency that only top-level heroes have access to. He handed the tablet to Izuku. Play it. Izuku pressed play. The screen showed a dark cell. A man was strapped to a chair, covered in tubes. He had no face, only scar tissue. All for one. The villain tilted his head, as if listening to music only he could hear. Hello, little brother. All for one's voice rasped through the speakers. Izuku stiffened. And hello to you, Ninth. All for one continued. I felt you. In the forest. That beautiful, terrible scream of power. You woke up early, didn't you? The villain chuckled. They will call you a hero. But soon, they will look at you and see me. They will see the power to rule. The power to control. And you will be lonely. All for one leaned forward against his restraints. Don't worry. You won't be lonely forever. I am preparing a playdate for you. My successor is almost ready. But you are the prize. The villain's voice dropped to a whisper. Come find me, Izuku Midoriya. Bring the origin back to its source. Let us become one again. The video cut to black. Izuku lowered the tablet. His hand was shaking. Not from fear. From anger. He can feel me, Izuku whispered. Just like I can feel him. Yes, All Might said. The connection is a two-way street now. He knows you are the key to completing One for All. He wants to steal it, Izuku said. No, All Might shook his head. He doesn't want to steal it. He wants to merge with it. He wants the origin power combined with All for One. If that happens, there will be no stopping him. He will rewrite reality. Izuku looked out at the city. He thought about the fear in his friend's eyes. He thought about Bakugo's quirk failing. He thought about the power coiling in his veins, begging to be let out. He says I'll be lonely, Izuku said. He is trying to manipulate you, All Might said. You have us. You have Class 1A, do I? Izuku asked. They looked at me tonight like I was a monster, All Might. All Might didn't answer immediately. He couldn't lie. Then you must show them the man inside the monster, All Might said. Control, Izuku. That is your only path. You must master the king, or the king will become a tyrant. Izuku looked at the moon. It was full and bright. In his mind, the vestiges were silent, listening. He's coming. Izuku thought to them. Let him come. The second user replied, sharpening a metaphorical blade. I'll be ready, Izuku said aloud. He turned back to All Might. The golden rings in his eyes were dim, controlled, but ever-present. Take me back to the dorms. I have to apologize to Uraraka about her teacup. All Might smiled, a small, sad smile. That's a start, my boy. That's a start. As the car drove back down the mountain, Izuku looked at his reflection in the window. The reflection looked back, and for a split second, the face wasn't his. It was a face made of white light, faceless and terrible. The king's court was in session, and the war for the throne had just begun.